So after some last-minute campaigning from all four candidates in the last few minutes, voting in the Labour leadership election has closed. We'll get the result on Saturday morning, but first let's talk to our reporter Ellie Price. Ellie Price, what's the campaign been like?
Well, first of all, Joe, you've just missed the firework display and the fly past of 1,000 doves to mark that moment that the ballots closed. And what a contest it's really been. It's been a 4-month marathon contest. Cast your mind back to when we were talking about Chuka Umunna maybe being the front runner in this contest. He, of course, threw his hat in and then promptly retrieved his hat from that ring a few days later. The man, of course, we've all been talking about is Jeremy Corbyn, who, if you remember, squeaked in with just a few minutes to go before the nominations closed. And it's been his agenda of anti-austerity that seems to have really captured the imaginations of some of those new voters. He's been able to galvanise plenty of new supporters. And I think we really need to rewind a little bit and talk a little bit about the leadership contest of rules for electing a new leader, because of course Ed Miliband changed those rules after he was elected leader amid claims that the unions had too much influence. So what we've seen is affiliated supporters, people who could pay just £3 to have a say in who's the next leader. And there have been around 610,000 ballot papers sent out. Around 4,000 people have since been barred from voting because it's seen that they were part of parties that had no interest in the Labour Party. We heard plenty about infiltration from the far left and, of course, the far right. So plenty to talk about in all of this. And I think another thing worth mentioning, Joe, well, I've been hearing from some Labour sources today that despite all this talk of new supporters and who's voting from where, actually turnout might not be quite as high as everyone's expecting.
Right, well that is interesting, bearing in mind the interest that seems to have been registered. Now, there's no doubt that the leadership rules have dogged this campaign, controversially. What about the story, really, that has sort of emerged in the last few days about people receiving ballot papers or not, as the case may be?
Yeah, that's been of a concern of the Yvette Cooper campaign, and particularly the Andy Burnham campaign, who say that a number of people had contacted them to say that they hadn't received their ballot paper, and Andy Burnham's campaign said that they passed on the details to Labour HQ to investigate. Labour HQ say that everyone was sent a ballot paper in the end, that people needed to check their inbox, to check their junk mail on their inbox, and that everything that could have been done was done. And of course, all irrelevant now because the ballots are closed. Right,
now what about Liz Kendall, one of the contenders, seen as very much the Blairite candidate and also trailing the others? Of course, we don't know exactly because there'll have been a lot of people voting in the last few days. What's she been saying?
Well, it's quite interesting. She made a speech this morning. The timing, of course, quite interesting because very little time left for anyone to vote. So I think this was a message to the wider Labour Party. Essentially, she said that modernisers had been too technocratic and managerial, and she said that the debate that was going on in the Labour Party had been going on simmering for years, she said, and that Labour had simply papered over the cracks. She said, cracks rather, excuse me. She said that people were annoyed with politics as usual. And whatever had been said essentially in this campaign, Labour really needed to concentrate on appealing to the wider electorate now, and that's going to be the bigger challenge, whoever's elected on Saturday afternoon.
Not long to wait now. Ellie Price, thank you. Well, joining me here in the studio is the Labour MP John Woodcock, who is a member, or certainly a supporter, of Liz Kendall's campaign team. Do you concede that she's lost?
It could be nip and tuck. Let's see on Saturday. I'd be, let's say, surprised if Liz emerged on Saturday. Surprised but delighted if Liz emerged on Saturday as Labour's next leader.
What's the campaign been like for you and the Liz Kendall team on the doorstep?
I've been really proud of Liz, actually, and I've been proud of the supporters who've gone out day after day because, I mean, she and everyone who has worn a Liz badge on Twitter and social media and been out has had so much thrown at them.
Have they? Is that the reception you've had? I mean, has it been hostile?
A lot of, certainly on social media, a lot of it has been hostile, and I think that is one of the things that after this contest we must draw a line under, because it is utterly toxic for party supporters, people in the same party, to label other people as Tories. It's a big insult in the, forgive me Toby, but it's a big insult in Labour to call someone else a Tory if you're a Labour supporter, but also electorally, it's madness. Because what you're saying, someone who is a proud, paid-up member supporting the Labour Party, you are saying that the things they represent are for another party. Now, forgive me, but I mean, just in pure electoral maths, that makes it much more difficult to win a Labour government than easier. But
is that telling you something about the direction of the party and the direction of the supporters within the party? And have you misjudged that?
Unquestionably, I went into this contest thinking that Labour had suffered a defeat. We'd gone backwards under Ed Miliband rather than forwards, and that meant that we needed significant change. And I thought that the ideas that Liz was putting forward were the ones which gave us the best chance of being able to put our values into practice. Now, let's see the result. But it looks like voters may well be voting for change, but of a different kind of change, and I think will give us a chance of actually forming the next government, which is what we've got to be about if we're going to want to change people's lives.
John, isn't it slightly naive of you to think that the Corbynites are going to be sort of magnanimous and conciliatory
if they win?
If they win, I mean, normally what happens when the hard left seize power is it's immediately followed by show trials and then purges.
Well, let's see. I think it's really important, whoever wins, that actually a culture of tolerance and respect and just being, nice human beings to each other. The public looking at this want to see political parties who actually reflect their values, but also reflect the way that they would like to see the country run, that they would like their communities to be run. So it's going to be in the hands, really, of whoever wins, whether it's Jeremy Corbyn or whoever else, to make sure that we are actually...
Do you think Liz herself will be conciliatory? Will she actually serve in a Corbyn shadow cabinet?
Liz has said repeatedly and has said again today that...
And she's not alone.
That she wouldn't know. And, I'm the same. For me, that there are too many big differences. If you're in the shadow cabinet, you have to be able to sign up ultimately to the full platform.
But even if you're not in the shadow cabinet, people, obviously, in broadcasting, in the media, are going to want to speak to senior figures in the party, and sure, it will be difficult, I put to you, that for people like Liz Kendall to say, yes, I support Jeremy Corbyn. He won this fairly and squarely, and so that problem of unity is going to re-emerge.
Well, Liz and I and all the people who support, we are Labour to our core. It is in our blood, and we will remain passionately for the Labour Party, whoever is leader, and we will do whatever it takes for Labour, whatever we can to play our role to make sure that Labour can give Labour the best chance of succeeding.
And
if Jeremy is elected,
if
Jeremy is elected, he will have a mandate. He will have won, but just as when Tony Blair swept a victory in 1994, Jeremy didn't say on that day, OK, hands up, I'm a Blairite now. I'm sure he'll forgive the likes of me who don't immediately sign up to being Corbynistas. We need to, I think, put forward a positive vision of a party that can actually make a difference to people's lives.
Right, but I mean... If they would like people like you, though, the Corbynistas, if Jeremy Corbyn does win, to be part of the party, they say they want to...
I am part of the party.
Well, but part of
no one can take that away
right,
from me.
But part of their, if you like, leadership, you're going to reject it.
Well, everyone has a choice to make, whoever is the leader. They're offered the chance to serve on the front bench. And to do that, you have to be able to sign up and argue for, if necessary, the entirety of the platform. Collective responsibility is the principle of being part of the front bench. I couldn't do that with Jeremy, but I'm absolutely remain a member of the Labour Party who wants a Labour victory.
Before, Toby, I will come to you, but John Cruddas this morning, who's considered one of the great thinkers of the Labour Party and certainly has been thinking a lot about the defeat, said to the Today programme the party was at risk of collapse if Jeremy Corbyn becomes leader. Do you agree with him?
Well, we have to do everything that we can to make sure that isn't
because you think there is a risk.
Well, Labour has a proud history and heritage. This is if Jeremy wins, and let's see, but this will be a new departure. But we remain the party that wants to win elections, I think, to be able to improve the lives of the people who need a Labour government. And that will be the same on Saturday as it is today. And so we absolutely have to make the best of this.
Do you think there's a chance of you winning another election if you agree with John Cruddas that the diagnosis that he put forward after the election was that actually the Labour's solution under Ed Miliband was at odds with where the country was, certainly on the economy?
Well, pretty much by definition it was, because we lost. I mean, we went backwards.
Right. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn's obviously views on anti-austerity and spending are at odds with the country then.
Well, I remain of the view that we can only win when we are in touch with the British people, and one of the founding causes of Labour not winning was that they didn't trust us with our money. That will remain true, whoever is the leader, and we will have to tackle that if we want to be able to put forward a winning platform.
And yet he's the one that's got all the new support, isn't he, Jeremy Corbyn?
You may face a loyalty test as soon as next week. What if there's a government vote on whether to have military action in Syria? And Corbyn, as the newly elected leader of the party, says, if you vote with the government, I'll withdraw the Labour whip. What would you do in that scenario?
There are all sorts of hypotheticals.
And we'll be going through all of them next week, depending on what the result is.
I mean, yes, I've been clear on Syria, as many are, that
well, to some extent, you disagreed with Ed Miliband on that issue at the time.
And something as fundamentally important as putting armed forces in harm's way and causing loss of life, really, whatever the choice, I think have to be something you're comfortable with as an MP. But let's not remember that. Let's not forget that. I think Jeremy, if he does win, will understand the culture of needing to vote with your conscience, given his history of voting throughout the time of the Labour government. So, you know, we've got a long way to go.
Yes, well, loyalty would be an interesting test for everybody in the Labour Party, won't it, on the issue of loyalty on these issues. John Woodcock, thank you. Now, we'll come back to the Labour leadership contest in a moment, but first it's time for our daily quiz. Take a look at this photograph. The question for today is, whose bald head was President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, kissing? Was it A, William Hague, B, Martin Schulz, the President of the European Parliament, C, our guest of the day, Toby Young, or D, Sajid Javid, the Business Secretary? All those famous political bald heads, obviously. At the end of the show, Toby, I hope, will give us the correct answer. Now, how will the Conservatives take on whoever becomes Labour leader on Saturday? Well, ever helpful, George Osborne has given a long interview to the New Statesman where he discusses the leadership contest, I'm sure he has, on Jeremy Corbyn's rise. Mr Osborne says he has looked on in complete astonishment as the whole of the Labour Party moves leftwards, abandoning the centre. And I think, therefore, abandoning the working people of this country. On Jeremy Corbyn's policies, such as scrapping Trident and leaving NATO, the Chancellor hints at a future Conservative attack line, saying, "We don't regard what is being said in the Labour leadership contest as a joke. We take it deadly seriously. I regard these things as a real risk to Britain's security." Well, to discuss all this, we're joined by the Times columnist and former Conservative MP, Matthew Parris.
Hello.
Welcome back to the programme. First of all, though, Toby Young, are you still unrepentant for having joined as a registered supporter to vote for Jeremy Corbyn, only to make mischief?
I am fairly unrepentant. I think it's been quite generally the number of Tories, including some ministers who've joined as registered supporters in order to vote in the Labour Party leadership election, has been quite disruptive. It's given the Labour Party a headache. It's been quite an effective kind of bit of political
immoral.
Mischief. I don't think it's immoral. I think actually they should have had an open primary, and people from all parties and none should be able to vote in selecting the next leader, as they can in some American presidential primaries. But just to be clear, I thought that Jeremy Corbyn's candidacy was a joke and a big mistake that the Labour Party had made. I never envisaged he might actually win.
Are you regretting it then?
Well, I didn't actually get to vote for him because I was weeded out quite quickly in the box where it said, "Why have you joined?"
You were found out to be an infiltrator in that sense.
In the box where it said, "Why have you become a registered supporter?" I put to consign Labour to electoral oblivion. So you didn't need to
told
be
the truth
Sherlock
on that.
Holmes to.
But you say it wasn't immoral, but in effect it could be seen as helping to rig an election in that sense. It wouldn't be fair election if you are merely going in to make mischief.
Well, it's you know, if anyone wants to take that line, I think it would delegitimise Corbyn's anticipated victory, because clearly many registered supporters will have been instrumental. We learnt this morning, some rumours are saying that more registered supporters are due to vote than actual members of the Labour Party, and the vast majority of them are from the hard left.
Right, well, and of course they may then contest the result if that is seen to be the case. I mean, we've just heard Toby Young saying he wanted to consign Labour to electoral oblivion. Do you want that too?
No. I think we do need a realignment of our parties in Britain, but I wouldn't like to see the Labour Party spend a decade in oblivion. I think that would be bad for Britain, and I think it would be bad for the Conservative Party. People underestimate, a lot of Conservatives underestimate, how very little there is that actually unites all Conservatives, except the need to keep the Labour Party out of government. They're the barbarians at the gates. Remove the barbarians from the gates, I think you would see very serious strains quite quickly within the Conservative Party. You may even have seen them in that vote in which 37 people voted against on the European referendum.
Well, and that came right at the beginning of this new Parliament. So do you think that people in the Parliamentary Party are emboldened by what they see as disarray in Labour ranks?
I've no doubt that they are. And that interview you mentioned that George Osborne gave the New Statesman, he repeatedly talks about the need for the Conservative Party not to move to the right in response to the Labour Party's problems. I think he sees there is that difficulty.
Do you think that is the only thing that glues the Conservative Party together, is fear of Labour, or fear of Labour coming into power?
No, I think the Conservative Party have now seen a historic opportunity to monopolise the centre ground, which is what George Osborne said in an interview in the New Statesman.
So what was that vote against the government then, where so many of them rebelled?
Well, let's not forget that the present leader of the Labour Party, the leader of the Labour, when that happened, was Harriet Harman, not Jeremy Corbyn, and the Conservative Party were never more split than when Tony Blair.
Right, we're not going to see that again then. We're not going to see that again after Saturday.
We probably will, but we would have seen it anyway, even if Chuka had become the next Labour leader. I think it's oversimplistic to say Labour in disarray, hard left leader, splits will be the result in the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party will probably always be riven by splits, particularly over Europe.
A Conservative chief whip trying to persuade rebels who feel very strongly in the Conservative Party, on the right, for instance, on Europe, his final or her final clinching argument with those rebels is, OK, that's what you believe, I know you believe it sincerely, but look, split the party and we'll let the other lot in. If the other lot disappear, that arrow in the Chief Whip's armoury disappears.
But it didn't work. That arrow was completely ineffective in the mid-90s.
But it came quite close. It came quite close, though, didn't it? It came quite close in terms of splitting the party. I mean, what is it that gives you such confidence that those sort of divisions couldn't wreak havoc on the Conservative Party?
I'm not confident that there won't be divisions within the party over Europe. I just think it's simplistic to link that to Corbyn. I think we'd probably be facing a degree of upheaval within the party over the European issue, willy-nilly, whoever was leader of the Labour.
Yes, we will.
Do you think, though, there is just glee within Tory ranks? Do you think they're right to just be gleeful? I mean, I don't feel much worry or fear within Tory ranks so far about Jeremy Corbyn being leader of the Labour Party if he wins. They are very much like Toby Young. They're relishing it.
I think they're wrong to be. There is glee, and they're wrong to be gleeful on two grounds. One, as I've said, I think trouble will come to the Conservative Party too. Secondly, I think in terms of the national interest, a strong opposition that believes in something that large numbers of people can vote for is very good for the democratic process, and we may be about to lose it.
Right. I mean, does Matthew have a point there? I mean, even during the Blair years, people felt that the Conservatives, to some extent, were in disarray, and there was not a strong opposition there.
I think it's there's certainly a case can be made for having a strong opposition, but I think the bigger risks are that, first of all, this will energise the left, and we're more likely to see strikes, protests, disruption of every kind as a result of the revitalisation of the left, which has kind of taken place under, as they've rallied to the
And what would be
Corbyn
wrong
banner.
with that? I mean, you say it wouldn't be a strong opposition, but actually it could be a very strong opposition. It just could be a very strong opposition firmly at one end of the political spectrum.
Yes, it won't be very strong in terms of the votes that it gets, but extra parliamentary action of the kind that Jeremy Corbyn has sometimes supported, that there could be quite a lot of disruption. But in the end, it won't give anybody a Labour government. And I think a country needs to believe that it has a choice between two viable possible governments. And you listened to John Woodcock a few moments ago, a really good man. It's quite clear listening to him that the unity that he hopes for, he's whistling in the wind. It can't happen. He doesn't think that Jeremy Corbyn would be a good Prime Minister, does he? Did you get the impression that he thought that? If you don't think that, how can you play a useful part in a political party?
But then, interestingly, one of the other things you said in the article was that under the system that is being used to elect this new Labour leader, it would be a Pyrrhic victory for Yvette Cooper or Andy Burnham. Why so?
Again, George Osborne in that interview with the New Statesman made the point that the whole party has been dragged to the left, particularly Andy Burnham, to a lesser extent Yvette Cooper.
But why would it be a Pyrrhic victory if they win in the end, if Yvette Cooper does come through, for example, because it's the same system that elects or a very similar system that elects the London mayor?
It'll be a Pyrrhic victory because she'll have won a party that has shown itself to be much more left-wing than anybody thought, and because she'll have had to move her own position somewhat to the left in order to embrace those people.
I broadly agree with Matthew that it's certainly a disaster for the Labour Party if Corbyn wins, and it will almost certainly mean the Conservatives will be in power for another decade. But I think it's odd to kind of focus your anger on Tories who are reasonably pleased about this prospect rather than the Labour Party for committing suicide.
I'm not angry, I'm apprehensive.
All right.
Apprehensive.
I will leave you in that apprehensive state. Matthew Parris, thank you.
Jo.